Hey, what's going on everyone? Today we're going to be checking out this massive cooler from Newair. Now this is one of the biggest 12-volt portable electric coolers that I've seen, and I'm super excited to get to test this out. Now Newair did send this over for me for testing and review, and if you guys seen my review video a few weeks back on the Newair 48-quart cooler, that is a dual zone cooler that ran off of solar power, ran off a battery, and did really well. Has 2 zones, freezer and refrigerator. Now I took this 48-quart cooler out on 4th of July to a party, loaded it up with a bunch of ice waters, and ran the thing off a battery in their basement the whole time we were there for 7 to 8 hours. So it worked flawlessly for that. Even though this doesn't draw a whole lot of power, they were afraid that it was going to overload their circuit in their basement because they had all kind of cookers and everything going. So I just ran it off the battery that day and it worked great. Hey guys, this video ended up way longer than I thought it was going to be. So I'm going to put timestamps down below. That way you guys can click on whatever part you want to see and just jump right to that part. I didn't really want to leave too much out because I really wanted to show you exactly how this cooler performed and what kind of energy it used. So I hope you guys enjoy. If you find it helpful, please consider giving a thumbs up and leaving a comment down below because it really helps my channel out. And if you really like it, please consider subscribing, and I will see you guys around on the next one. But let's get into the video. Now this bigger cooler also runs off of a solar panel or a battery, or you can run it off of AC if you plug it in a wall, or one of these 12-volt power stations like the Opez, the big blue power station here. I got the vatted power station. I got to make a review on this one yet, guys. Right now, this one's super cheap for 350 bucks for a 712 watt hour power station as of me filming this video. I'm actually probably going to record some on this one today too. A lot of different options here, guys. The ways you could power it. You can also power it off of your 12-volt DC outlet in your car, which they do give you an 11-foot cord for that, so you can plug it into your cigarette lighter and then plug this cooler in. And whenever you do that, if you do buy the additional 173 watt hour battery, now this battery is a little bit pricey at around 200 bucks, but if you get one battery, you can have it in your cooler and run this off of solar. If you don't have the battery installed in the cooler, it will not run off of solar, so just keep that in mind. But I do recommend at least one battery for that reason. And also why this battery is nice is because when you have it in the cooler and you're running off this battery, you can have this thing plugged into your vehicle while you're driving. It'll run off your battery of your vehicle, and then when you shut your car off, if you were to go into a gas station to get something, or if you were to go into the grocery store to get something, or just take a break, get something to eat or whatever, it automatically reverts over to the battery, will run off the battery. Then when you come back out, start your car up, it will continue to run off your car and recharge the battery. So really nice. I really love the way that this thing is just integrated with this small battery to help the cooler run for a few hours. Very convenient in certain situations. Instead of having to lug around one of these power stations and keep it separately somewhere in your vehicle, now you could do the same thing with that, having these charged from your vehicle and then have one of these plugged into the cooler. Don't get me wrong, that works great. It's just another piece of equipment to carry around with you and more cables. So really nice and compact, convenient to have at least one battery in my opinion, although they are a little bit pricey if you compare watt hours compared to what you can get one of these power stations for watt hours to price, if that makes sense. So we're going to be doing all kind of testing today, but this thing has a massive 122 quart capacity. Now they advertise this as 115 quarts on their website, and I even questioned this after I got it and opened it up, and they confirmed with me that it was 115 quarts, but I feel because the user manual states that it's 122 quarts, the box states 122 quarts on it, I think it's 122 quarts and 115 liters. So keep that in mind, guys. Hey, more capacity for the money. Can't go wrong with that, right? So the sun's actually starting to come out of those clouds. It's a super cloudy day. I didn't think I'd be able to test the solar today, but I did run this thing on solar the other day with a battery, and it ran perfect, flawlessly, just like this one did off of solar. Now I do recommend at least a 100 watt panel if you were going to run these off of solar. That way if you did have a cloudy day, you would still get some sort of decent input into it. And the panel that I recommend more than anything is the X-Star 100 watt solar panel, SP100. This thing has been my favorite panel so far. I do plan on getting some more different ones coming to compare to this, but this has excellent output, has ETFE coding. But if you guys want to know more about this, go ahead and check out that full review. But this panel works really well with this cooler. Now, before I got this cooler, I was thinking, man, 115 quart cooler is going to be huge and is not going to fit in my vehicles very well, and it's just going to be too big for me to use. But boy, I was wrong. when I got this thing, it is big, don't get me wrong, but it's not super big to where it won't fit, say, in the back of my wife's CRV. I threw it in there. It fit perfect in the back. Now, it did take up a lot of the room, but I was pleasantly surprised that it actually fit in there because I didn't think it was gonna fit until I got it and opened it up. And it's actually smaller than what I thought it was gonna be, but way bigger inside than I thought. I hope that makes sense and help you guys out here. But the measurements on this thing, if you were to go from the very end of the handle to handle, is roughly, I would say, about 40 inches. And that's from the little bump on the handle to the end of this handle. From handle to handle wide, I would say around 23 inches. Now, if you were to take this handle off, you could take it off by removing these screws on both sides to pop this off of here to make it shorter. And you really could take the one off this side too if you wanted to. And that would get the cooler down to about 35, just over 35 inches long by 20.5 inches wide. So if you were to put this in a permanent spot in your camper or an RV or something and didn't need the handle on there and needed a tighter space, you could take that off and get that down a lot smaller. Just keep in mind, if you take the handle off, it's going to be really hard to maneuver this thing around and to load it into a vehicle or out of a vehicle. It would have been really nice to see them put a second handle like the one on this side on this side. That way, if you did want to take this off, you still had some kind of handle to move it around. And another thing to keep in mind is these are plastic handles here. Now, when I got this cooler initially, if you guys watched that video, the handle on it was broken off, and that was due to damage during shipping. So not sure how durable these handles are going to be if this super big cooler was loaded to max capacity. So you may want to be a little cautious picking it up by this handle if you were trying to load it into a vehicle, if it was completely loaded. What I would recommend doing, just to be safe, I'm not saying it's going to break, but just to be safe, I would probably keep it open a little bit and grab it by these metal rods instead of grabbing it here. Now, I didn't have any issues so far because I took the baskets out when I had them loaded and put it in the back of my wife's car and then set the baskets down in after the cooler was already in the car. So it wasn't really heavy to put in the car and was easy to load that way, which is what I recommend doing anyway. But just keep that in mind. Now, one thing that's really nice about this cooler versus the 48 quart cooler is the back wheels are flush with the sides of the cooler. And on this one, they do stick out just a little bit. So a little more compact on the wheels there on this one. But the capacity of the inside of this, guys, is really nice. You get a lot of room here. Now, you don't get a cutting board with this one like you do with the 48 quart one, but I really love the fact that you get dual lids, and these lids are easily able to be turned around if you needed them to open the other way. You could put them on this way, and you can have them open both ways if you want. Now, you can use both sides of these as a refrigerator if you want, or you can use them both as a freezer. You can use this side as a fridge, this side as a freezer, this side as a freezer, or fridge. I'm getting confused, guys, but long story short, you can use it however you want. You can use this whole thing as a freezer, this whole thing as a refrigerator, half and half, whichever compartment you want to be, whatever you want, you can make it that way by the two different compartment settings up front. So really nice. Love the dual lid on this design here versus the single lid on that one. I love that if you have this side set as a freezer and you need to get a drink out, you don't have to let warm air into your freezer for condensation and stuff like that. Plus, it'll keep it running a lot longer, not having to open the whole thing up like you do with the 48 quart. Now, don't get me wrong, that one still works very well. And you could see in my video, I made an actual little cover inside out of some insulation for the freezer side. So when I was using it as a freezer, I could stick that on there and it would hold that coldness in when I opened the lid. So make sure you guys go check out that little hack in that video if you want to see that. But if you're not worried about space and you want a lot of capacity for weeks-long camping or a long trip, then this cooler is going to be excellent. So without further ado, guys, let's get into some of the testing. We're going to throw some stuff in here, show you what it can hold, and see what kind of power it uses. Now, in the manual, it states that it uses 80 watts of power, which is about average. I seen it hitting up right around 92 to 93 watts max when I had it running off of a power station, and I've seen it run down a lot lower than that, around 60 watts too. So it's going to vary. 80 is probably around the average on max. And again, that's going to vary on your temperature outside and things like that. Now this cooler is black, so it is going to attract some heat. Definitely want to make sure you guys try to keep these in the shade when you're using them, if you're charging from solar, or throw some kind of blanket over there. But you want to be sure not to block your vents here. You want to make sure the vents are open on all three sides so that this compressor can cool down and stay vented. Essentially, it's basically a mini refrigerator, guys, mini refrigerator freezer. And another thing that I really am excited about having this one is if I have a power failure or a power outage for a few days at a time, I can hook this up to one of my solar generators and throw a bunch of my meats and stuff in there that I don't want to go bad, and it should keep them cold for a few days without any problems, especially if I throw a solar panel outside and run this thing on solar during the day and run it on the solar generators at night. So it's pretty nice, guys. So the battery goes on the side. There's a little compartment on the back side here, just like the 48 quart one that you remove. You remove this panel here and you can insert the optional battery and it will run off the battery. And then, like I said, when you have the battery in, you have a solar input there, a 5521 connector, and it will charge the battery and run the cooler off of that solar panel. But we're gonna go pop this battery out. I'm gonna do a pre-chill test with it here, and it's around 80 some degrees out here today, so pretty warm out. But we're gonna see what kind of power this thing uses with that pre-chill, and then we're gonna load this thing up and see how long it'll run for, see what kind of energy it uses. Because that was one of my main concerns getting this cooler, is I wanted to see what kind of energy it used with my power stations to see how long it could last on one of these. Now, if you're going camping at a full hookup site and you were using this in addition to your fridge in your camper, or if you didn't have a fridge in your camper and you had a 120 volt outlet there, you could plug this thing into that and not have to worry about energy usage or anything. So a lot of scenarios like that, it's going to work great as well. Or if you were constantly driving in your vehicle, just using this thing while your vehicle was running, that's another great option as well, where this thing would run nonstop without issues. All right, guys, so what I recommend doing when you load this cooler up is to pre-chill the cooler from a 120 volt outlet if you can. That way the initial surge in power that this thing uses is going to be from your AC. Now this is when you can pre-chill it with the battery, but it's going to use a lot of that battery power, and you can pre-chill it with these as well. Now you could plug a solar panel in. Right now it's bright and sunny. I could put the battery in with the solar panel and it would run just off of that pre-chilling, but we're going to see what kind of wattage this thing uses. Right now we're plugged in the AC. I'm going to go ahead and turn it on, and you can control each zone separately. What I'm going to do is set them down to 32 degrees on both sides, and we're going to let it run here and see what kind of wattage it pulls on the kilowatt meter being plugged into AC. So 45 watts of power coming from the AC to initially chill this thing so far. Now it's probably going to go ahead and ramp up, and right now, guys, this thing is in the sun and this top is really, really hot. I can't even keep my hand on there. So like I said, you're going to want to keep some kind of solar blanket or maybe something that you use in your car for keeping out the sun, like behind your windshield. That would be good to cover this if you had nothing else and it was outside. But you definitely don't want this thing in direct sunlight like this, for sure. Would be nice to see them start making these coolers either in like a silver or a white to help reflect some of the sun instead of attracting all the sunlight. But I do like the look of the black one. It just gets a little bit hot when it's out here in the sun. So it's up to 50 watts now, and we'll see how long it takes to get down to temperature. It is currently 2:50 p.m. So we'll come back and see how long it takes to get down to temperature. All right, guys, so it's been about a half hour now. Let's see how this cooler is doing. So right now the cooler is using about 75 watts. It was using about 80 watts a minute ago. Let's see what the display says. The display says 34 degrees on the bigger side and 40 degrees on the smaller side. And it says it's at 13.8 volts with that power supply adapter plugged in. Now let's try something. Let's plug the battery in. And to turn this battery on, you would push and hold that button. Okay, now with the battery plugged in and turned on, the battery capacity is only at 3 bars when I hit the switch, and it is not charging the battery currently. It's still only using about 77 watts of power. The light is blue. When the battery is charging, the light will turn green, and when it's running off the battery, it will turn blue. Now, the cooler's not running off the battery, I don't believe, because you can hear the compressor running at a higher speed. Now, if I unplug it, you can hear the speed slow down slightly when it kicks on and starts running off the battery. And when I plug it back in, you can hear the fan and everything ramp up a little bit. So I know it's running off the AC when I'm plugged in. but it is not charging the battery. So we're gonna see when the cooler shuts off, when it reaches cooling temperature and the compressor shuts off, we're gonna see if that light switches over to green and starts to charge up. All right guys, so the cooler just reached temperature and just shut off. The battery started charging, the light turned green, and it's using 28.5 watts or so to charge that battery up now. So the battery will not charge while the cooler is running on AC, but once it reaches temperature and shuts off, it will charge the battery. So it is now about 3:30. It took about 40 minutes for it to reach its pre-chill, and the one compartment's at 29, the other one's at 31, and it started out well above 80 degrees. So let's open this up and see what the thermometers inside say. It does feel cool in there. It's at 44 degrees or so. So sometimes you just have to let these things cycle a few times to actually get down to temperature. Down there in the bottom one, it's in the refrigerator range, about 38, and up here it is about 48. So it is fluctuating a little bit, but I'm sure it will kick back on here soon and it should equal itself out. So I do have both of them set at 32 degrees currently. It will take some time for them to run and equalize out. I've seen this on a few of my other refrigerators, portable refrigerators as well. And even like the IceCo, I have to usually leave it like 10 degrees colder than what I actually want. So hopefully this thing kicks back on and ramps back up. I'm not sure where the temperature sensors in this cooler are, but I think sometimes the temperature readings are a little bit inaccurate, and that's why I always recommend putting some thermometers like that in there, just so you get a good idea of what kind of temperature it's staying in your cooler. All right guys, so right now we're using around 78 watts. And one thing I didn't realize is I had this in eco mode that whole time during this pre-chill test. So if it was in standard mode instead of eco, it may cool down a lot quicker. Now, I don't know why this battery doesn't charge while the cooler is running, but on the Newair 48 quart cooler, when it's running, the battery will charge while the cooler is running. So not sure why this one doesn't charge while it's running. The light is blue, which means it's not charging, but up here on the display, it does show the battery level going up as if it is charging, but I really don't think it is because the power draw from the kilowatt meter does not go up. So we're going to go ahead and switch this over to max mode here by hitting the settings button. Oh, there, that's easier to see, but now you can see the battery level going up. We're going to go ahead and change that over to max mode and see what kind of power it draws. Now this thing does also have 3 different levels to keep your battery charged in your vehicle. Low will run your battery down to a lower state in your vehicle and possibly cause it to not start if your cigarette lighter port still got power when your car was shut off. Now you could change that to medium, or you could change it to high, so the cooler will quit running before your battery gets too low and still allow your vehicle to start. We're going to go ahead and leave that on low for now because I'm not really worried about it draining any batteries. And you can see right now it says the battery voltage is 12.3, so I'm not sure if that's the battery voltage of the AC going into it or the actual voltage of the battery itself. So let's go ahead and unplug this, start running off of the internal battery, and it dropped to 11.5. So that voltage there was probably the voltage of the supplied power supply, not of the internal battery when it was plugged in. Another thing nice about this cooler is it does have a USB port here for charging your devices like your cell phones and things like that. And just like their 48 quart cooler, if you weren't going to use one of these compartments, you can actually disable each compartment. Press the plus and settings button and hold it down, it will disable the large compartment. And then if you press the negative button and the settings button, it will disable the small compartment. So if you guys are running through your camping trip and you realize you're towards the end of your trip and you can put all your items in one side, then you can disable one side to save a little bit of energy that way. So even though the cooler doesn't recharge the internal battery while it's running, at least it does charge it once it reaches temperature and shuts off. So we're gonna go ahead and plug a power station into it now, see what kind of power it draws, and then we're gonna see if it charges the battery off of that when it's running or not. But before we do that, you can see that it's now using 112 watts of power on max mode. So the power jumped up drastically from 70 to 111 or 112 watts. But the battery is still not charging while it is running. The light is still blue. All right guys, so now I have the solar panel plugged into the cooler, and you can see it's super cloudy here. There is no sun really shining. It actually just started raining, sprinkling a little bit. But we are getting 10 watts of power into the cooler, but the battery is charging at 10 watts. So it's still getting some kind of power charging that battery up, even on this cloudy day with that X-Star panel. And that's what's nice about that panel, is that it's still gonna get some decent wattage, even though it's a super cloudy day out today. So, I mean, 10 watts ain't really great, but it's better than 0 watts coming in on a cloudy day. So we're getting around 10 watts. And like I said, the battery is charging. I wish the sun would come out here. When the sun's out, guys, it runs off that solar panel no problem and charges this battery up whenever the cooler shuts off and is just sitting there idle. The battery continues to charge at a lot higher wattage than 10 watts. Hey, quit squeaking that door. I need to put a little oil on that door. It's getting in my video. All right, now one option you have if you do buy the internal battery and you have a portable power supply that outputs at least 10 amps from your 5521 port, you can use a 5521 to a 5521 cable directly into the solar from your 12-volt outlet of your portable solar generator or power station, and you could run it through. It will recharge your battery. You could see it's charging at about 28 watts for the internal battery, and then when the cooler kicks on, it will run off of this from that 5521 port. Now, if your power station has a 5 amp limit, it may reach over the 5 amps and will throw an error code. So as long as your outputs output 10 amps like this one does here, you should be fine. And this is the Opez portable power station. I'll leave links for it down below as well if you guys are interested in it. All right, guys, so I lowered the temperature down to 25 degrees on the cooler so it would kick on, and it's using currently 55 watts on max mode to cool it down to the 25 degrees through that 5521 cable. Oh, and guys, just like the 48 quart cooler, this one also has a bottle opener on it, which is really nice. All right, guys, so right now I'm plugged into the Big Blue, and this has a 13.2 volt regulated output. It's using about 90 watts or so on max mode. According to this meter here, it's using around 86 watts. So 86 to 91 watts, somewhere around there is what it's using on max mode to cool this thing down. It was at 32 degrees. I lowered it to 25, and that's plugged directly into the 12-volt outlet on the cooler here. And this is just a little adapter I made to be able to monitor. Now, one thing I noticed, which is really odd, is that when I had it plugged into the Opez, the voltage was fluctuating hugely on that, but on this it was holding steady around 40 or 50 watts. Let me show you what I mean. So on the Big Blue, you could see that it's holding steady around 85 watts or so on here, 12.7 volts, 6.7 amps, and the wattage doesn't vary, but it's pretty high there. And on the display, it's around 89 to 91 watts. Now on the Opez, it's only using around 50 watts or so, fluctuating a pretty good bit on this meter here. 12.3 volts, between 3 and 4 or 5 amps. I don't know, it's fluctuating so much, it's hard to say. And on the display, it's showing 76 watts, then it's jumping all the way down to almost 0 watts, and then it'll jump back up to 80 watts or so. And I don't know why it's doing that, guys. It has to be something with maybe the voltage of the Opez. It's regulated right around 12.6 volts according to my testing, and that one is at 13.2 volts. So maybe that makes a difference on this. If I unplug this battery, shut the battery off, then it holds steady at around 80 watts on this meter and around 80 to 82 watts on the display, and everything's normal whenever I shut this battery off. But that's really weird that it's doing that with the Opez, and it doesn't do that with the Big Blue solar generator. So not quite sure if it's some kind of incompatibility issue with the battery plugged into that, maybe because of the lower voltage of the Opez. I'm assuming that's why, but I've never seen that before. That's a little bit odd, guys. If you know why it's doing that, please put it down in the comments below and let me know. But like I said, it's only doing it when the battery's inserted. All right, guys, so it actually just reached temperature again at 25 degrees that I have it set to. It says the big compartment's at 28 and the small one's at 20. Let's take a peek inside. This is the 28 degree one. It's actually 36 in there. does feel pretty cold. And this one is at 30 degrees, and down below it's a lot colder. As you know, cold air sinks and warm air rises. It's down below freezing in the bottom, probably around 28 degrees down there, and up top it's right in refrigerator range, about 34 degrees. So for the items you want to keep colder, guys, you might want to put underneath that basket down below in the cooler there, and it should stay a lot colder than up here. All right, guys, so I just plugged the Rockpals Freeman 600 in. It's using right around 75 to 90 watts fluctuating on here, and according to my meter, it's using a pretty steady right around 68 watts, 69 watts. So not sure why some of these power stations are fluctuating. Now I do have this set on max mode, and they say it uses about 80 watts. I would say that's pretty fair, but I have seen it run around 65 to 70 watts as well on max mode. So it's really going to depend, probably going to be a lot more efficient once I pack this thing full of food. And now, like I said, you don't want to pack that thing full of warm food or warm drinks and expect it to be really efficient. It's going to take a lot to cool those drinks down. So you're better off putting cold drinks in if you were running it solely off a power station. So keep that in mind. You're not going to throw a full case of warm water in there and expect it to run, because it's going to run pretty much nonstop to cool those bottles down. So just something to keep in mind, guys. That's why it's always a good idea to pre-chill your cooler or the drinks that you're putting in them. Make sure they're cold when you put them in. Now, on my previous camping trip that I did, I was using a different cooler, and I was throwing a few warm bottles in here and there as I used the cold ones, and it was able to keep up no problem doing it that way. But if you do pack this thing full of completely warm drinks, it is going to take a little bit more energy to cool them down. And I've noticed on this cooler, it's been about the same as some of my other ones, where I want to normally keep that temperature set about 10 degrees lower than what I really want, and it gets it pretty close to the temperature that I want. So if I want it to be right around 35 degrees, I'll probably set it to around 25 and just monitor it and make sure nothing freezes. All right, guys, so I noticed whenever I had my vatted power station plugged into the cooler, when the cooler's not running and it's charging the battery, when I'm plugged directly into the DC of the cooler, it's only charging the battery at around 8 to 10 watts. When I plug into any of my other power station, it'll charge them up to around 27 to 30 watts on the battery. So I'm not sure why that's giving me a limitation. However, if I did plug the 5521 port directly from the vatted into the solar input in the cooler, then it charges the battery at around 27 watts. So really not sure why it does that, guys, and even I sometimes can't figure out electronics and why they do the things they do. So if you guys know why it makes a difference when, you know, plugging into the regular port versus plugging into the solar port and the output I'm getting from this vatted, maybe it's because of the lower voltage output, but then again, if you plug it into solar, it charges just fine. I have no idea, guys, but if you know, put it down in the comments and let me know. I'd appreciate it. Sometimes you have limitations with certain devices working together, and I guess this is one of them. All right, guys, so long story short, if you're trying to use the vatted portable power station to run the Newair cooler with the battery installed, it's not going to work really well. It's going to be a little wonky. I'm not 100% sure why. It works really well with the cooler if you don't have the battery installed, but if you do have the battery installed, it just doesn't work right. But what I'm really going to do right now is put it in the car, start the car up, and see how it runs off the car, because ultimately, if you guys purchase a battery, more than likely that's how you're going to be running this cooler. You're going to have it in your car with the battery installed, with the cooler plugged in while you're driving down the road. Then when you shut the key off, you're going to want it to revert back over to the battery. So let's throw it in my wife's CRV and see if it works as it should that way. So before I load this up into the car, let's check the temperatures inside versus what the display says. It currently says 21 degrees on the big side, 20 on the little side, sitting at 11.6 volts with that battery. I have everything unhooked now, just running off the battery. And the big side, it's about 28 degrees, so that's not too bad. Said 21, it's at 28. Like I said, sometimes they're around 10 degrees off. And this side is about the same at 30 degrees, and down below it's still below freezing, so we'll see if that bottle of water eventually freezes. So what's nice about this is it has that handle where you can wheel this thing around and makes it really easy to move around. Now, like I said, once this thing's loaded completely full of food, you might want to be careful picking it up completely all the way off the ground with this handle. And you are a little bit limited on clearance underneath in the back. The back's angled, so the higher you lift it, the little bit more clearance you'll have. But if you were rolling over gravel or something like that, you might have a problem, but no problems at all rolling it through grass and on hard surfaces and things like that. So this is a little bit of a big cooler to be putting in the car by yourself, especially if it was loaded down. Right now I only have those few bottles of water in it, so it's not too bad. But if this thing was loaded with food, it would definitely be a no-go. All right, so as soon as I plugged this thing in and started the car up, the cooler actually kicked on because the temperature raised a little bit from me having it open. And right now it's running at 69, between 63 and 69 watts. I'm set on eco mode and the cooler's set to 20 degrees. And the light on the battery is blue, which makes me believe the battery is not charging and it's running solely off the car. Now with the 48 quart cooler, I'm pretty sure while it was running, the battery was charging. So I don't know what's different about this one, maybe because it takes more power to run it. But we're gonna go ahead and unplug it here from the vehicle. Luckily she has a 12-volt plug in the back trunk, so that's convenient there. But we're gonna go ahead and unplug it and see if it automatically reverts back over to the battery and continues to run without shutting off. That's the main thing. All right, so I just unplugged it. The light on the battery is blue and the cooler is still running. I can hear the compressor running just fine, and I'll go ahead and plug it back in, and it reverted back over to the car just fine. Now I'm gonna go ahead and increase the temperature with the controls on the cooler, wait till it shuts off, and then see if it starts to charge the battery. All right, so I increased the temperature back up to 25 degrees, and the cooler shut off. It's now charging the battery at right around 27 watts. The light is green on the battery now, which means it is charging. So like I said, while the cooler is running, the battery will not charge, but as soon as the cooler shuts off and basically cycles off, then the battery will start to charge. So that's pretty nice that, you know, it will charge your battery up over time at around 25 to 27 watts from your vehicle cigarette lighter port when the refrigerator is not running, and then when you shut the car off, it will continue to run off that battery. So you shouldn't have any issues at all. When you start your car, shut it off, it should just revert back and forth until that battery is either dead or you shut the cooler off. So now let me show you guys the capacity of this thing, and let's put some stuff in it. All right guys, so I have this cooler loaded up on the big side. I have a 30 pack of beer in there, 24 waters, 20 cans of soda, and 4 apple juices in the big half of this, and then in the small half, I'm only gonna keep 2 waters in there. I'm gonna keep 1 below and 1 above to see if the below one freezes. But this cooler is super heavy, guys, even with just that side loaded up, because what's nice about these coolers is you don't need ice, so you could pack twice as much food or drinks in them. But with that being said, this thing is really heavy now, even when picking it up with this handle. And that's what I want to caution you guys about, is if this thing is loaded down with food, I don't know if I would pick it up completely with just that handle. You might want to grab these side handles, the part that's aluminum, when you're lifting it into your vehicle, or take the wire bins out before you load it into your vehicle and then put the bins back in it after you get it loaded up, because I would be concerned about this handle breaking off, being that the sides were plastic. That would have been nice to see an all metal handle or all aluminum handle on the sides where it goes together. But like I said, this cooler is massive and does hold a lot, so it will be a little bit heavy when it's loaded down. All right guys, 2 things I forgot to mention earlier in the video is the Newair 122 quart cooler, or 115, whatever you guys think it is. I think it's 122. The height of that is just under 21 inches. It's 20 3/4 inches, which is not very much taller than the 48 quart cooler, which is nice because it will still fit in back of my Ford F-150 with a tonneau cover on it, and it's not super tall. So that's really nice. Now, if you have some smaller trucks with a smaller bedside height, then maybe it wouldn't fit with the tonneau cover, but in a Ford F-150, it fits just fine with about an inch or so to clear. Just like the 48 quart cooler, the 122 quart cooler also has an LG compressor, which is nice to know that it has a nice name brand compressor in it. And I have this thing packed up now. I have a fully charged battery. We're gonna see how long this thing will run set at 25 degrees and hopefully it doesn't freeze my drinks. I'm gonna monitor it through the night, and hopefully I can wake up and catch the thing before it dies completely, or maybe it'll make it through the whole night, who knows. But I'm gonna have it set at 25 degrees. I believe it should stay around 35 degrees inside the cooler, but like I said, I'll monitor that, and I will adjust the temperature as needed so that my stuff doesn't freeze, because that could be a mess if it does. And I will let you guys know as we go along with this test for the next few hours. Now, this has been about 5.5 hours since I started this test this morning, and it's been a long, drawn out process on this testing, but hey guys, this is why I do these tests, so that you guys don't have to, and that you can learn and know about the product before you purchase it, if you decide that this is something that's right for you. And if it is, I'll leave a link down below in the description where you guys can pick up one of these, and possibly a coupon code for you guys to save a few bucks if I can get one. And if you do use that link, it'll be an affiliate link, and I'll make a small commission at no extra cost to you, but that's what helps support this channel. So I want to thank you guys in advance if you do use that link. So let's get into this testing with the battery and see how long this cooler can last. And man, my arm is getting tired holding this heavy Canon R6 camera. Man, that thing's getting heavy. But anyway, let's get into it, guys, to see how long this can last. Now, on eco mode, it was just using about 70 watts. It just currently bumped down to about 60 watts there. So you're gonna average between 60 to 70 watts on eco mode. And in max mode, it usually averages somewhere between 70 to 90 watts. Just something to keep in mind. You are gonna use just a little bit more energy in these bigger coolers than you will with the smaller ones. But if you had a lot of food to take with you, it might be something that you guys might need, because it's gonna be more efficient than trying to run two smaller coolers, because that would be over 100 watts if you were trying to run two smaller coolers.
So the cooler's been running on a battery for 4 hours now. It is now midnight. It's set at 25 degrees on both. We got 23 degrees on this side, 22 on that side, and it's set on eco mode. The battery is at 10.8 volts, and when it reaches around 10.3 at an idle, when the refrigerator is not running, that's about when it's dead on the Newair 48 quart cooler. So I'm assuming it's going to be about the same here. Let's open it up and see how it's doing inside. It says 23 on this compartment, and the compressor just shut off. It's right at 40 degrees here in the top. It's probably colder down below, and you can see it has nice lights here to light up the compartment when you're getting into it at night. But everything feels pretty cold, but it is about 15 degrees warmer up here than what I have it set to out here. Like I said, down below is probably colder. And on the smaller compartment, which I'll probably use as the freezer, it's set at 25, and it's down to 32 degrees. And down in the bottom, it's about 26 degrees. But the water is not freezing yet. This wall definitely gets a little colder than this wall. You can actually see some of the condensation lines in there. All right, guys, it's been 6 hours. The cooler is currently running. The battery's sitting at 9.7 volts, pretty much empty. So I'm gonna go ahead and call this a wrap, because it's not gonna get much more usage out of the battery before it shuts down. This is about where the 48 quart cooler shut off, when it hit 9.7 volts when it was running. So I'm gonna go ahead, take the battery out, plug a power station in, and let it continue to run on that and see how long that will last. So on a battery set at 25 degrees, got about 6 hours at around a 70 to 76 degree ambient temperature. And it actually just kicked off, and you can see it went back up to 10.3, but there's really not much life left in that battery. Let's see how the temperature is holding up inside. Right around 40 degrees still in the front compartment here. And pretty much the same in the back, 36, and still below freezing in the bottom. All right, guys, so the Newair has been running for 7 hours now on the vatted power station. Now I started at 92%, it just hit 71%, so about 20% in 7 hours, which isn't too bad. These are still both set for 25 degrees. Let's see how the cooler's doing inside. It's at 40 degrees up top, and I stuck one down here below to see how it's doing down there, and it's right around 32 degrees. So you are gonna have about a 10-degree difference from the bottom to the top. That's normal. According to some of my other coolers, that's about what I've seen in them as well. So keep your colder items down below. Let's check this other compartment. and it's still holding steady about 36 degrees up top, and the bottom is just below freezing. Let's see if that water bottle is starting to freeze down there. It's right about 30 degrees, but no, it is not frozen. So really, really cold, guys. Probably pretty close to freezing, but not frozen. So like I said, if you want to keep something colder, keep it down here. So I would say the minimum setting to keep it on like a safe refrigerator zone would be about 25 degrees to have this cooler set at. All right, guys, it's been running for 12 hours now. The vatted is down to 58%, which is 34%. So use 34% in 12 hours, which is right around, from the 712 watt hours that this power station has, it's right around 240 some watt hours or so that it used in 12 hours. Now, again, the ambient temperature in here is 72 degrees. I have both zones set for 25. The big compartment's at 28, small one at 22. So let's see how it's doing. Still at 40 degrees, so it's holding 40 degrees pretty steady. And down here is about 33, 34 degrees, and that's about sitting on top of one pop can down there. So like I said, we'll be colder down at the bottom, but these drinks are really cold. Let's try this compartment, and this one is still holding about the same at 34 degrees, about midway. Very cold, very nice, guys. So it may take a while to actually get down around temperature, but it's been holding pretty steady. That's why I recommend getting some of those thermometers and sticking in there just so you can get a rough idea of how your cooler works. As you noticed, I got to keep this one set right around 10 or 12 degrees lower than what I actually want the temperature inside. But once you get to know your cooler and know how it works, you shouldn't have a problem with it. It seems to be working really well. Not using a super ton of power on eco mode. That's what I've been running this in. It's been using right around 60, 65 watts or so on average once it's down to temperature and just kicking on to maintain that temperature. And again, these numbers are gonna vary with your situation. If you're out in the sun, direct sunlight, you're gonna get a lot less runtime. If you're out in 80, 90 degree weather, you're gonna get less runtime. Or if this is in a hot car, this is a test at about 72 degrees ambient temperature. Yesterday I started it, it was about 75 to 78 degrees outside when I started the test with the internal battery. So not too bad, guys. I was really happy to get 6 hours out of the battery, and it's running on this pretty good so far. I started at 92% down to 58% in 12 hours. All right, guys, it's been going strong now for 21 hours. If it can last another 6.5 hours, that's when I'll wake up for work. I'll check it again. I'm hoping it will last at least that long. We are down from 92% to 34% on this 712 watt power station. So hopefully we can make it another 6.5 hours, and I'll check it again when I wake up. All right, guys, it's been 28 hours that this cooler has been running off of this vatted 712 watt hour power station. It used 76%. I started at 92%. We are now down to 16%. So it used about 541 watt hours based off of the capacity of this. And it's been using around 19 watt hours per hour. So in my opinion, guys, that's really good. Let's see what it's holding. The compressor just shut off. So we're at about 37 degrees on this one. Just about 32 degrees in the lower one. And this side is 32 degrees up top. Below freezing at the bottom, about 28, 29 degrees. But the water is not frozen. It's super cold though, guys. And you can see the condensation lines on the side here. They're actually icy. It's actually icy. You can feel it icing up, but not on this side. So this side, like I said, will be a little bit warmer, but it's still cold. Still really cold. There's some condensation lines down here. So I got ice forming on this wall, ice on this wall, and a little bit here, a little bit here, nothing on this wall, a little bit here. So this wall will be probably the warmest. All right, guys, I'm gonna wrap that up on this test for this power station running this 28 hours to use 76%. Really good, guys. All right, guys, so one last test. I got the cooler set to -4 on the small side and 35 degrees on the large side. It's still holding 40 degrees. So even though I don't have it set down to 25, I have it now at 35, and it's still holding between like 30 32, 33 degrees down below and still holding 40 up here. So you don't really have to have it set 10 to 15 degrees lower if you have it all cooled down to temp, and then you could probably raise your temperature back up. Like I said, guys, that's why it's good to have these thermometers so you get a rough idea. This side says -4. It is actually at about 3 degrees here, and then down below, almost -3 degrees down below, guys. So these are still frozen. Ice cream's frozen pretty hard, rock hard. Really nice, guys. All right, guys, now I've had the cooler running off the Oaks for 8 hours. I have the large side set to 35, small side set to 0, and it used about 170 watt hours according to what this has capacity, and it used 17% because I started at 71%, now down to 54. So about 21 to 22 watt hours per hour to have this side set at freezer mode. And it's 8 degrees here and about 1 degree down at the bottom. So pretty good, guys. Everything's frozen. Didn't use a whole lot of energy. Since I have this side set at 35, let's see how it's doing over here now. About 42 degrees on this side and around 40 down below.
All right, guys, so as you can see there, the cooler works really well in refrigerator mode or freezer mode. If you guys need something for weeks-long camping trips, then this is definitely going to be the cooler because there is some massive capacity there. Now, just keep in mind during this test, like I've said throughout the video, the ambient temperature for the power draw on that test was about 72 degrees, and I had it set to stay right around 30 to 40 degrees inside, which is right in refrigerator mode. Now I had to have it set about 10 to 12 degrees lower than the actual temperature I wanted, but I noticed once I bumped it up to about 35 degrees, it's still maintaining between 35 and 40 degrees. So like I said, just get some thermometers, throw them in there just so you can have a rough idea of how the cooler works and what your temperatures are down below and up top. And it should help you control the temperatures in your cooler a little bit better. And keep in mind that if you're opening and closing the cooler a lot, then you're gonna get less runtime and use more energy. And if you're using it as a freezer, you're gonna use a lot more energy. This testing, I wanted to test it all as a refrigerator because that's probably how I'm gonna be using it most of the time. But if I use it in the future on a long trip and I use it as freezer mode, I'll let you guys know what kind of efficiency I get out of it during half freezer, half fridge mode. So thanks for watching, everyone. If you guys are interested in this cooler, I'll leave an affiliate link down below where you can go check out all the details, the current pricing, and a coupon code if I can get one for you to save a few bucks. And if you found this video helpful and interesting, please make sure you guys leave a comment down below because it really helps my channel out. And don't forget to subscribe so I can see you guys around on the next one. Thanks for watching, everyone. Phew.